The house was unusually quiet that morning, even for a Tuesday. A soft fog had rolled in overnight, muffling the sound of seagulls and traffic from the highway. I had just settled into my armchair by the window, the one with the worn arms and faint imprint of Richard's favorite books still on the cushion beside it when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something a small tug in my chest, like a whisper I couldn't ignore, made me pick up. "Mrs. Caldwell," the voice on the other end asked gently. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." There was a pause. I didn't recognize the voice, but the way he said my name made me sit up straighter. "This is Eli Barnes. I own Barnes & Sons Jewelry in Seaside. I'm calling because something came into my shop yesterday. A gold necklace, engraved with the initials RC. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My fingers tightened around the phone. I was told it came from your son and daughter-in-law," he continued, "but when I examined it to repair the clasp, I found something unusual inside, something I believe you should see for yourself." I stood without realizing it, the ache in my knees forgotten. "Are you sure it was my necklace?" My voice came out too quiet. I cleared my throat. It couldn't have been. The initials were clear. The chain was custom-dated craftsmanship. "I didn't mean to alarm you, but I thought you had the right to know." The call ended politely, his tone measured, but I stayed frozen by the window long after the line went dead. The necklace. My husband's necklace. The one he gave me on our 20th anniversary. The only thing he left me really when he passed. And I hadn't seen it in weeks. I turned toward the bedroom, my chest tightening. The top drawer of the bureau. That's where I'd last placed it the night after the funeral. I crossed the room, hands trembling, and pulled it open. It was empty. The drawer gaped open like a wound. I ran my fingers across the velvet lining as if the necklace might reappear by touch alone. But it was gone. Clean gone. No chain, no clasp. Not even the faint trace of gold dust it used to leave behind when I laid it there each night. I stood there for a long moment, stunned by the absence. That necklace had never left the house, not in decades. Richard had clasped it around my neck the night he gave it to me, our 20th anniversary, a quiet dinner at home with candles and music he knew I loved. He'd taken my hand across the table and said, "It's not just gold. It's us." I had laughed, touched by the sentiment and the way his eyes softened when he said it. I never thought a piece of jewelry could mean so much until he was gone. It became the last thread to him, the last thing that felt like ours. I leaned against the dresser, dizzy. The timeline clicked into place too easily. A few weeks ago, Lena had come over uninvited, offering to help me tidy up. Nathan showed up the next day, asking casual questions about my documents, whether I had misplaced anything lately. It hadn't occurred to me then how quiet their hands were, how deliberate. I walked back into the living room, the floorboards creaking beneath me. On the mantel, the photo of Richard smiled with that boyish stubbornness I loved and hated in equal measure. I stared at it, willing him to speak. Of course he didn't, but Eli had. I slipped on my coat and reached for my bag. The sky outside had begun to clear. The fog thinned to a pale shimmer along the trees, and I could just make out the direction of Seaside. The drive wasn't long, but I hadn't taken it alone in months. The necklace was gone. That much was true. But if Eli Barnes had found something inside it, something he thought I needed to see, then I needed to see it now. The bell above the shop door chimed softly as I stepped inside, and for a moment I was struck by how little the place had changed since Richard and I last came here. Same glass counters, same faint scent of silver polish and cedar wood. We'd brought the necklace in once years ago, just to have the clasp tightened. Richard had insisted on doing it himself, but finally relented when I threatened to use duct tape. A man stood behind the counter, Eli, I presumed tall and neatly dressed with gentle eyes that didn't flinch when he saw me. "Mrs. Caldwell?" he asked. I nodded. "You said you had something of mine." He gave a tight, respectful smile and opened the small case in front of him. Inside lay the necklace. My necklace. Its chain coiled like a question mark, the pendant glinting under the soft light. I didn't damage anything, he said quickly. But when I opened the clasp housing to check the spring, I found this tucked inside. He reached beneath the counter and gently placed 2 items on a dark velvet cloth, a tiny brass key no longer than my pinky nail, and a folded piece of aged photo paper. I picked up the photo with trembling fingers. It was us, me and Richard, on our wedding day. The image had faded, but the joy hadn't. His hand was on my waist, my hair curled from the wind, and we were laughing not at anything in particular, just because we could. Richard gave me something else. Eli said quietly, pulling out a sealed envelope from a drawer. My name was written across the front in his handwriting, the one that had filled grocery lists and birthday cards. He left this with me last year. Said if anyone other than you ever brought in the necklace, I was to call you and hand this over. I reached for it slowly, my breath shallow. The paper was thick and heavier than I expected. I didn't open it right away. I just held it as if waiting for the moment to tell me what came next. Back in my car, I sat with the envelope on my lap for a long while before opening it. The edges were worn just slightly, like it had been handled more than once. I ran my thumb over Richard's handwriting one last time, then carefully broke the seal. Inside, the letter was short, just a page, but every line felt like it had been written with weight. Iris, if you're reading this, it means someone tried to erase you. Don't let them. This key opens safety deposit box, Naja Confronting 7 at Seaside Bank, the branch on Lincoln Street. The staff will know what to do. Everything is in your name. No one else has access. I made sure of that. I'm sorry I'm not there with you, but I want you to know I saw this coming. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the signs. You've always trusted too deeply, even when they didn't deserve it. I love you. I always have. Take back what's yours. My fingers tightened around the paper as tears welled in my eyes. I had to read it twice before I could breathe. He had known. I thought back to the months after the funeral when the house suddenly felt too full with Nathan and Lena dropping in so often. She'd started cleaning without asking, moving my things into boxes for storage. Nathan had asked where I kept the deed to the house, whether I had a will drawn up. I thought they were looking out for me, concerned that I might not be managing things as well alone. But maybe they weren't watching over me at all. Maybe they were watching me. The key in my hand felt heavier now, not because of its size, but because of what it meant. Richard hadn't left it to chance. He had hidden it somewhere no one else would think to look close to me, but just out of reach. I looked back toward the shop. Eli stood behind the glass, his head bowed respectfully. I gave a slight nod, then started the engine. The bank was only 10 minutes away, and I didn't want to lose my nerve. The bank was quiet when I arrived, the lobby still smelling faintly of paper and floor polish. A young woman with neat braids and a patient smile led me into a small private room after checking my ID and taking the tiny key. Her voice was polite, but practiced the kind of tone reserved for people the world assumes are fragile. This way, Mrs. Caldwell. Take all the time you need. She placed the box on the table and left me alone. It took both hands to lift the lid. The first thing I saw was a thick folder bound with a crimson ribbon. I untied it carefully, revealing neatly stacked documents. At the top was a letter, Richard's handwriting again, but shakier this time. You gave everything to this family. Now take your life back. The account under your name is active. No one else has access. I deposited every month for years. Not much at a time, but enough to grow. You'll find the deed too. It's yours alone. The house is waiting. I never told anyone, not even Nathan. And one last thing, the will. The real one. The one we wrote together before I got sick. They don't get to rewrite what we built. My chest swelled with a feeling I hadn't known in months, something that lived between grief and rage, but gentler than both. I took out the documents, slowly absorbing each one. There was a savings account in my name, with enough to carry me for years. The deed to a small beachfront property in Florence, Oregon. I had never been there, but Richard had mentioned it once when we were younger. Said he dreamed of retiring there, of reading on the porch while I gardened. And the will, dated, notarized, signed by both of us. It left everything to me. Sole ownership. No caveats. A tear slipped down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. I sat with it, with all of it. He had planned this. He had seen what I was too afraid to see. And now he had handed me a choice. I folded the papers neatly, placed them back into the envelope, and reached for my coat. Nathan showed up just after dinner unannounced, as if that was still acceptable. I heard the knock before I saw the headlights outside. I didn't move right away, just stood by the window watching him shift from foot to foot on the porch, his hands jammed into his coat pockets like a boy caught stealing something small. When I opened the door, his expression softened into concern, too polished to be real. "Mom," he said, "you weren't answering your phone." Lena and I were worried. I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked in slowly, eyes scanning the room like it had changed. It hadn't. Only I had. "I saw the car was gone earlier," he said. "Everything all right?" I looked at him steadily. "No. Everything is not all right." He flinched slightly. "Is something wrong?" I motioned to the couch but didn't sit. "Do you know where my necklace is, Nathan?" His face barely changed. Just a flicker. A pause too long. "What necklace?" "You know exactly which one." Lena came in behind him, then breathless and over-smiling. "Iris, we didn't mean to upset you. The chain was just sitting in a drawer collecting dust. We thought maybe you wouldn't notice. It wasn't yours to take." Lena's smile tightened. "We needed funds. The business has been slower than we expected. It's just temporary." I looked at her then, at Nathan. "You never asked. Not once." "We didn't think you'd mind," he said, quieter now. "You haven't worn it in years." It wasn't just gold. My voice didn't rise, but it struck harder than any shout. It was a promise. "From your father. And you sold it like a trinket at a garage sale." They said nothing. Lena sat down, suddenly solemn. Nathan looked away. "I got a call from the jeweler," I continued, "and I went. He gave me back what you sold, but what he gave me was more than that necklace." Nathan's eyes snapped back to me. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. I turned and walked to the mantel, picked up the envelope I had placed there that afternoon. I held it in my hand, not offering it to them, just letting it exist between us like a line they hadn't expected me to draw. The doorbell rang just past noon, sharp and deliberate. I was expecting silence that day, maybe the low hum of guilt, but instead I opened the door to find a man in a charcoal suit holding a leather briefcase and an apologetic smile. "Mrs. Caldwell," he asked. "I'm Gregory Hale. I'm an attorney representing your son." My mouth stayed still, but my hands curled slightly at my sides. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Caldwell has expressed concern regarding your recent decision-making. He's asked me to arrange for a wellness evaluation just to ensure your affairs are being handled appropriately." I stepped aside. "You'd better come in." He entered cautiously, eyes scanning the room with a lawyer's practiced detachment. I gestured to the armchair across from the fireplace and went to the sideboard. From the top drawer, I pulled a single file folder, crisp, organized, complete. "These," I said, placing it in front of him, "are the documents related to my finances, my property, and my legal autonomy." He hesitated, then opened the folder. As he flipped through the pages, bank statements notarized will deed to the beach house, his posture changed. By the time he reached the letter in Richard's handwriting, his tone softened into something closer to respect. "I see," he said finally. "These documents appear thorough, valid, and recent." "They are," I said. "Everything's in my name. Everything's in order." He looked up at me, then finally seeing the woman in front of him instead of the one described to him. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," he said. "I'll inform your son that no further action is necessary." I nodded once. "Do that." He gathered his things and let himself out without another word. I waited until the door clicked shut before I sat down. A few minutes later, Nathan pulled into the driveway. He didn't knock right away. I heard the car door slam, the unsure pause on the steps, then the tap of his knuckles on the glass. When I opened the door, I didn't invite him in. "You thought I was old," I said evenly. "You forgot I was also prepared." He stared at me like he didn't recognize who he was looking at. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to explain. The beach house sat at the edge of a quiet lane, framed by wind-worn fences and weathered hydrangeas. It was smaller than I imagined, but that only made it feel more mine. A porch with just enough room for a rocking chair, windows that opened toward the sea, a garden patch that had gone wild but not beyond saving. When I stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and salt. The floors creaked beneath my shoes, and sunlight stretched across the wooden planks like it had been waiting for someone to come home. I walked through each room slowly. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a reading nook tucked beside the fireplace. On the mantel was a tiny hook just above where someone had once placed a nail. I knew what had hung there. Richard had always said he wanted to frame one photo from our wedding day, just one. I never asked which. Maybe he couldn't choose. I stayed the night, and when morning came, I knew I wasn't going back. I drove home just once more to pack. Not everything just what I needed. A few clothes, a couple of framed photos, my books, the small box of letters Richard had written me over the years, and the necklace, of course, which I fastened around my neck before leaving. I didn't leave a forwarding address, just a note on the kitchen counter. I'm not running. I'm living. Iris. I didn't block Nathan's number. I figured letting the phone ring and not answering would say more than silence alone. He texted once asking if I was safe. I didn't respond. He didn't ask where I'd gone. The day I closed the front door for the last time, I didn't cry. I turned the lock with steady hands, placed the keys in an envelope, and slid them into the mailbox. By evening, I was back on the porch of the beach house barefoot, watching the tide draw in and out like it had been doing long before any of us were here. And I wasn't waiting anymore. It was nearly a month before I saw him again. Nathan arrived without warning, driving up just as the afternoon tide was pulling back. He stood at the edge of the path like he wasn't sure whether to knock or turn around. I opened the door before he had the chance to decide. He looked different, not just tired, hollowed out in a way that went deeper than fatigue. "I didn't expect you to fight back," he said quietly. I didn't offer a smile. "You didn't expect me to matter." He nodded, looking at his shoes. I was wrong. He didn't ask to come inside, and I didn't invite him. We stood on the porch, the ocean behind us, both of us pretending the air wasn't heavy with everything left unsaid. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I really am, for all of it." I believed he meant it. But that wasn't enough. I crossed my arms. Respect is not a gift, Nathan. It's a choice. And it's earned. I know. I waited. He didn't make excuses, didn't defend Lena or the business or the months of quiet manipulation. He just stood there owning it. "I don't expect things to go back," he said. "But I'd like to start again. However, you'll allow me to." I looked at him, my son, my betrayer, my child, and said nothing. But I didn't close the door. Instead, I stepped aside. Just enough. Most mornings I wake with the sound of the tide brushing the shore, a rhythm steadier than anything I've known. I wrap myself in my shawl, make a cup of tea, and sit on the porch with the necklace resting warm against my skin. The days feel different now. Not louder, just mine. I joined the local book club at the library 2 towns over. I planted roses along the fence. I started writing letters again, real ones, longhand addressed to friends I hadn't spoken to in years. I don't hear from Nathan often. When I do, it's small gestures, a photo of the dog, a postcard from a business trip. He's learning, I think, how to speak without taking up all the space in the room. I don't know if he'll ever be the boy I raised, but that isn't up to me anymore. What is mine now is this quiet, this garden, this porch, this version of myself that remembers how to live without apology. I sometimes reread Richard's letter, though I don't need to. I know it by heart. I think he'd like it here. I think he'd be proud that I didn't break. The necklace glints in the sun as I lean back in the rocking chair. "You didn't just take a necklace," I whisper, though no one is listening. "You tried to rewrite who I was, but I'm the one holding the pen now.